said he wasn't going to be. Because
Right.
Okay, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order of the Economic Improvement Corporation of the City of Kerrville. The first item after the call to order is the invocation. Robert, would you like to give the invocation today?
I'm going to do it.
All right.
Lord, thank you for the gift of life, the most precious gift, and all your creations. Guide us in our deliberations and keep us ever mindful of the words of the prophet Micah. What does the Lord require of you? To act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. Amen.
Amen.
Thanks, Robert.
Good job. Good job.
All right, item number 1 is the Visitors and Citizens Forum. Any citizen with business not scheduled on the agenda may speak to the Economic Improvement Corporation. No deliberation or action can be taken on these items because the Open Meetings Act requires an item be posted on an agenda 72 hours before the meeting. Visitors are asked to limit their presentations to 3 minutes. Do I have any visitors to speak today? See none. We'll move on to item number 2, which is the approval of the minutes from the regular EIC meeting held on December 17th, 2018.
I didn't see any changes or, I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes as written.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion or changes to those? All right, if I see that there are none, let's go ahead and vote. All those in favor of approving the minutes as written, raise your right hand. It is approved unanimously. Item number 3 are our monthly reports. Amy, are you ready for us?
Yes, sir.
Welcome.
All right, let's get started with the financial statements for the month ended December 31st. And so if you'll see, this is not our screen that's up. All right, so in your packet, you should have a financial statement for the operating fund and the project fund. Start with the operating fund. In the month of December, EIC received sales tax of $295,000. That was an increase of 17.1%, which looks like a very hefty increase. But when you break it down, it's still good news, but not quite 17%. So we had a large retailer file their December return early, and so we actually got that as part of our payment. We had them file their, we received an early payment. Their January return was filed early, so we received it in December. And we also had a prior period payment from a large utility. So anyway, when you factor out all the stuff that was, kind of one-time unique items, we were up 5.6%, which is still a very healthy number. And that was led by increases in the food service, construction, and retail categories, which are all important categories for us. On the interest income side of things, we earned $7,300 in interest income. We still have the money invested in Tax Pool, which is currently earning 2.59%, so a good return there on this completely liquid investment that can be used for projects at any time. On the expenditure side of things, we had expenditures of almost $278,000 for the month, and in addition to just the usual payments for debt service and the administrative fee, we also paid KEDC $70,000, and that represents 2 quarters. So we're paying them on a quarterly basis, and we paid them for the first and second quarter of the year. And we also moved $50,000 from the operating fund to the project fund for the administrative set-aside that had been previously budgeted. And we also moved the final $50,000 to the project fund for the tennis center. So y'all had approved an additional $250,000 in funding, and we moved $200,000 in November, and then the final $50,000 in December. So that covers the operating fund. If you'll turn to your next page, you'll see the project fund. There's not a yes, ma'am.
The interest income, was that for December?
Yes.
Okay, so the month before that, it was 8,100. So the difference just means because there were some.
Fewer number of days.
Okay, okay. I was just curious. Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay, so on the project fund, the only activity that we have in the project fund is that transfer in of 100,000. That's 50,000 for the administrative set aside and 50,000 for the tennis center. And then the final page, you have some analysis showing different activity and different accounts. So at first, you see the sales tax analysis that goes through December. And, you know, we're ahead of schedule on our comparison to budget and comparison to last year, as we've talked about. The middle part of the page shows the cash balances. So we have 55,000 in the operating fund and 3.5 million in the projects fund. As far as where that's invested, it's all at that text pool account. And then the bottom part shows of that 3.5 million that's in the project fund, what is already committed to something versus what is set aside money. So up top, you see the set aside money for business development, workforce housing, and administrative, totaling just over $1 million. And then down below, you see the committed projects. Some of those projects we've already transferred funding, and then some of it we have funding in the project fund that we're holding, but it hasn't been transferred yet. Any questions?
Questions, anyone?
All right. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, could I ask one question? I'm sorry. We were talking about the library, the history center. That was the renovations that were done in what year? Was that 17?
It was 16 and 17,
16 and
I think.
17.
Yeah, 16 and 17 primarily.
And-
And we'll get to, so those big sheets that y'all are looking at, we're going to cover that with EA's presentation about capital projects. But yes, that spreadsheet does include things that we spent in 17 and 18, just so everything will total down
I
correctly.
just remember the history center being so long ago, it seems like, that I didn't realize it would still be on this project report. But so I was curious. It's just my.
And you're talking about the big spreadsheet, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's so that's not something specifically EIC. That's for, you know, the general fund, and it shows expenditures in 2017 was the last time we had expenditures for
Okay.
that. So, all right.
Thank
Any
you.
further questions? Thank you, Amy. All right, item number 3B, which is projects update. EA?
Happy New Year. Can still say that. We're still within 2 weeks, right? That's the cutoff. Yeah. So I've got lots of good news. Seems like we've had good news coming to EIC, and a lot of that is begotten from this group. So River Trail extension to Schreiner University, that agreement was approved by the City Council at their first meeting in January. So we are excited to move that project forward. We're working on putting together the scope of the design engineering services and anticipate having that on an upcoming council agenda in the near term. So excited about that and ready to get going on the design effort and get to construction and get it built. Reuse distribution lines, again, as stated at your last meeting, we are basically complete on that effort. We're going back through and continuing the analysis of reworking the situation there along the Guadalupe River crossing. We are continuing to assess disaster recovery funds for both the removal of the aerial pipe bridge as well as the long-term fix for that. So we actually just completed our preliminary Texas Water Development Board application for that effort. So we are hopeful that it's been pre-approved, so we are moving that process forward. What we think we'll have, it's a very viable funding source for us, so we can go ahead and complete it. We are evaluating interim strategies to make sure that we're covered through the spring into the summer and the high demand period, so we can do what we need to do as far as meeting our customer demands.
What do you think
on
the
that side.
timeline is to roll that back up?
On an interim basis, we're going to try to be ready by April. On a long-term basis, it may take as long as 1.5 years with text dot approvals and other elements
Oh,
that
so
may
you're
be
gonna
a factor of it.
temporarily bring those lines back alive first, and then
In
a
the
final
line,
fix will be sometime later on.
That's correct. That's the current strategy that we're evaluating.
Did the city have insurance to cover any of this?
Yes, however, there's some pieces in there. It's a little bit of a gray zone on construction and substantial completion and a whole number of factors that we're looking at both with our insurers as well as some legal counsel. Tennis Center improvements, we're excited to let you guys know that we have let that construction project. We've got a pre-construction meeting set for later this month, so that effort is launching off. So we're very excited to be moving that one forward. Aquatics feasibility study, as we mentioned to you last time, they are taking a pencil to the elements that have the community has indicated they have an interest in pursuing. So they're putting some numbers to that. We've got some preliminary estimates that we've had, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the capital projects discussion. But we're evaluating what all the community desires and what we can afford and how all that kind of matches up. So more to come on that. And Legion Lift Station, again, good news there. We've got a construction contract that was let at the last city council meeting. So we are moving that effort forward for what will be a very crucial economic development aspect for the southeast portion of the community. As we wanted to give you guys a little bit of a highlight on where we're at, we got great bids that came in. You know, as we saw rising construction costs in a number of areas, and we talked to you guys about that during the fall months. Fortunately, we were able to get a quality bid that was about $5.5 million. With contingencies, with design fees, with all the other elements. That overall total project right now is looking at about $7.7 million. We had pre-funded it, so to speak, with the Texas Water Development Board funding and the EIC funding to be about $10 million. So we are currently evaluating that difference and what elements we'll have there. As we talked about with this group, the EIC funding will be first in, first out, so to speak, in regards to the construction process. So those will be the first dollars spent, and then we'll be evaluating that remainder piece, that 2.2 or so, with our city council on how they want to proceed with those Texas Water Development Board funds, and whether they want to go ahead and just take the 5.7 difference, so to speak, or whether they want to look at a reapplication to the Texas Water Development Board for some other applicable project that would be within that Texas Water Development Board funding ability. Be happy to answer any questions you all may have.
Are you going to mention the next date for the aquatic town hall meeting, or is there going to be
I'm not
another?
sure we have that set. Ashley, do you know what the?
Okay.
Right, they're still honing in on that. It's probably going to be February timeframe.
Okay.
Probably late February, but we will get that information out.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions?
Has there been a town hall meeting?
Oh, yeah,
We've
there've
had
been
two.
And what's been the results of them?
Well, they've
they-
honed in. They started with 5 options. They took general feedback on features and kind of where the current status is of the existing facility. They honed that into kind of 5 categories. The last feedback was really a totally enhanced building, but using the existing footprint of the aquatics element and kind of adding some features around it. There was a next step up, which was kind of shifting the facility in its entirety, and then having basically an indoor element to it as well. And then the 5th option was to have that same as the 4th, but reduce that indoor element. So it would be outdoor and could be an add-on later on. So what we've charged them with at this point is to look at potential phasing options, because the price tag was really more than I think we've afforded for at this point. But that's one of those conversations we want to have, with this group as well.
Is there just gonna be one more town hall, or more than one?
I think we are scoped for one more.
And then you will narrow down the scope of the project from that? You'll be able to, from the feedback?
Yes, and there's what we've tasked them really with is to develop a master planning process for that. So there may be some phased elements to it.
It might not be a bad idea, y'all are the experts, but to have some type of number on some of these options, because we might as well start preparing the ones that want to use this for various different reasons about the sticker shock on some and the practicality of others. Might make our jobs a little easier too at some point. Just
That's
a thought.
I think it's a good point. We should know the numbers if, in
Well, you
some
wanted to
degree,
get
a
their
range
ideas
of
at
numbers.
first. You don't want to scare them off into thinking, well,
No.
we could never do that. But, so they gathered the information, which was so objectional, without having any of the influences of money. But now it's time to bring the reality into I think, what it's gonna cost to do some of the wish lists, which they've all been very interesting, and a lot of people have come. I mean, there's been a lot
Right.
of interest, so.
Yes, ma'am,
lot
and
of
that
different
is absolutely the
uses.
next step, is kind of bringing in those numbers and kind of reality of where the rubber meets the road.
I mean, it was good for me to start thinking about it that way as well. so.
Absolutely.
Let me ask you, how much or of any of the ball fields would be needed for the expansion of the pool?
It really depends on what the configuration is that the community wants, but there is the potential for I would call the far westerly ball field to be repurposed in some form or fashion, and that may be again a phased approach where there's some parking lot elements that are incorporated. But we've really we've tasked them to look at a phased element, and so it may be some extensive period of time before that's really necessary.
Just out of curiosity, does the city still intend on maintaining the ball fields over there, or with the new athletic complex kind of just leave it alone? Or since, I don't know how much, our league's moved over there, the senior softball league, I don't know
Yeah.
how much action.
We're maintaining it to some degree right now. We're not looking at putting extensive improvements into that area for that very conversation. But a lot of those use has been transferred over to the new facility, and so we want to put money where money is needed and being utilized. And ultimately, the community may find that land could be better repurposed for another type of recreational use.
Could it be used for development, apartments, things like that? Is
No,
it
sir.
done that way, or only for?
No, sir.
No.
No, sir. It's a current park and recreation. It would take essentially a referendum vote to shift that to any type of other use.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, EA.
Okay.
Moved on to item 3C, which is a report from Kerr Economic Development Corporation. Gil, welcome.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, members of the board, I'll be providing a quick update on economic development activity as it pertains to Kerrville and the EDC. So I'll start with, all right. I'm going to be squinting a little bit here. Now I know to increase the font next time. Okay, so upcoming travel, we're going to be at the IEDC Leadership Summit. That is the International Economic Development Council. That's going to be in Florida, and that's designed for senior level EDO executives. And actually, myself, I'm going to be there. Walt can't be there this time around. And it's also a good place to not only catch up with your peers, but also have discussions on latest economic development trends and patterns. Also, I'm going to be going back to Austin. I'll be reporting on some of the results from the last two trips to Austin, and that's ongoing, especially now with the legislative visits. On the staff side, professional development, Teresa from our team, she's going to be at the Basic Economic Development course in Katy, Texas. That is a week-long course, and that is one of 10 courses that economic development officials should take over a span of 4 to 5 years. But at the very least, the first one is very important, and that's something that we're needing in our organization. In Austin, I've been there a couple of times. Both of those times was in December. We met with Brian Daniel. He's the Economic Development Executive Director for Governor Abbott. We discussed several leads as well as projects and some of the incentives that could play into projects that we'd be looking for Kerrville. He also said that take a look at the Film Commission, which reports to him as well. There's a lot of activity right now in Austin, and a community or a county such as Kerr could take on some of that. I know that the Visitors Convention Bureau is working on that, so we would be looking at ways to support, but also digital media and music, that there's some opportunities there, and I'll touch on those here in a little bit. The Lieutenant Governor, we met with his staff. That was with the Chief Counsel. Also toured the Capital Factory. That is an incubator program in Austin, as well as meeting with the IEDC President and CEO, and that's, again, the International Economic Development Council, as well as the TEDC. That's the State Trade Association for Economic Developers. And then other regional EDOs, again, going back to developing these partnerships with Kerrville. Also met with, had a one-on-one with Julian Alvarez. He's the Texas Workforce Commissioner. We're looking at different programs that would be a fit for Kerrville, and that's both funds and just staff support. We started talking about, okay, so what are the possibilities of developing some programs for pilots, for nursing? And this is just my now having completed my second month here in Kerrville, looking at some of the opportunities that we could have or need. Also welding, machining, and advanced manufacturing. So he basically said, come back with some kind of a plan and we can start creating a custom program for your community, for your county, and has said once we develop that he would be looking at coming in with his staff the second quarter of 2019 to hopefully to launch some kind of a program. So again, this is part of the 2050 plan and looking at what it is that we need to do on the training side. The Capital Factory, coming back to that, there's we're researching the possibility of doing work in an incubator. I know there's been some discussions here in the community. Capital Factory is one of the best in the country, and they are located in downtown Austin. They're a high-tech incubator, and the beauty of that is that they'll work with other communities. Not that they would set up a Capital Factory in Kerrville, but they could definitely help us with having access to mentors and some of their coaches, like on a monthly basis or quarterly basis, if we were to develop one here. A marketing proposal. So next month, we're going to be coming back to the board, looking at, we're going to be working now. By then, I should have completed my 3-month immersion tour. And I'll be developing a marketing and prospect development plan. Grabbing again from the 2050 plan, the economic development portion of that plan, and now really customizing that plan with what it is that we need to be doing. We'll be identifying different trade shows where we can go and prospect or mine for prospects, as well as conferences for professional development. The costs associated with that, we're looking at our current budget and are we going to increase? Do we have to increase that? And if so, we would be coming back with a plan for that. On that end, on promotions and tours, I would also be looking to propose FAM tours, and those are familiarization tours where we would be bringing in site selectors to tour the community. That's not free. It costs money to bring site selectors in. So again, we're going to be proposing that. The other one is looking at the New York, New Jersey. That's where the majority, there's a huge cluster of site selectors that are there, as well as media. So looking at taking a small delegation to that area, again, to start really getting Kerrville out there. Detroit, Chicago, Cleveland continues to be an area to mine for prospects. So I would be proposing that as well. And then also Mexico City. If we are looking, it would be both Canada and Mexico. We're looking at foreign direct investment. There's 2 opportunities there. And if we look south, or we look north at Austin, the Office of the Governor has an office in Mexico City. And as a result of meeting with them, they've said, you all have an office there too. It's just a matter of you all getting down there. And we would have staff support as well. San Antonio Foundation also has an economic development office in Mexico City. So it's to our benefit to partner with them to access the pipeline of prospects that they have down there. But again, this is something I'll be proposing, and then hopefully we'll start going down that path. On my immersion phase, there was an article recently in the Daily Times where I was quoted saying that I'm looking to meet with 200 community stakeholders. So right now I'm a little over more than 100 meetings, and that is a brief 2 to 3 minute with somebody where for some reason I bump into a lot of people at Gibson's. And they're like, hey, you're the new guy. So immediately I'll ask them some questions to an actual sit down, 1 hour long lunch or whatever it may be. And again, it's part of my process to pick up on what does Kerrville want to do, what does Kerrville need, outside of the 2050 plan to add to that. And also it's my part to kind of let people know, introduce myself, this is who I am, here's what I'm working on, and also a little bit on the personal side. Some trends and some patterns that I've picked up on. Everybody wants to see support with local small businesses. And obviously that's something that we're already looking at. And then the other one is everybody loves downtown and everybody wants to see something downtown. I think there's a lot happening already, but how can we add to that now? So with that in mind, now the goal has, and again, me coming in, working huge projects, now I'm scaling my model down to now carefully balance business recruitment, specifically with identifying suppliers in our local supply chain, economic gardening, which is a term coined for developing startups, small businesses, and entrepreneurs. And then the other one is our workforce, balancing the workforce with attainable housing, because if we're gonna grow, we are gonna need a workforce in order to fill in, the walls of these companies that would be coming in. So there's gonna be a balance between all these three. Now moving forward, at the KEDC and also at the EIC, our monthly meetings, we're gonna be reporting on 3 items. One's gonna be a quick marketing update. On the marketing side, here's what we're doing to promote the community, to promote the region, and then also looking at editorial placement. So in addition to the local media, how is Kerrville being reported on at the state level and at the national level? Are we making any kinds of rankings at the national level? And if not, what can we do to start getting on their radar? And again, it's all about perception. What's our perception right now out there as far as investment in this community? So we'll be reporting on that. And then also our prospect pipeline. By then, we'll already have some kind of a pipeline where we start reporting on projects on a monthly basis. And that would include looking at the new projects, pending projects. Are they active? Are they cold? Are they on hold? Are they going to require incentives? Because some projects don't require incentives. And if they do, what's the return on investment to this community and to our taxpayers? So we can report on those even before we start considering the incentives for a particular project. And then when applicable, if we need to protect the identity of a company that is, or a project that is active, then we will use a code name. And that concludes my report.
On your small company support, local support, what kind of form do you think that's going to take?
Good question. I'm not too sure yet. With small companies, there's a couple things you could do. One is financial support. But we would have.
My question is, what have they raised as ideas of support? Have they raised any ideas?
Oh, have they raised any ideas?
When you say small company support, it could be a lot of things.
Yeah, it could be
training for staff, finding staff, could be facade changes, it could be lots of different things.
And most of everybody has asked how, on your marketing efforts, are we going to be included in that? That's basically what most of them have asked. One specifically did ask, well, what's in it for me as far as like funds? And at that point, we're not ready to go to do that yet. But when we are, we'll let you know. And of course, we would have to have criteria for them to qualify for funds if we decide to develop a program for that.
Are you going to use the current or the old matrix that was established, or are you going to create a new matrix?
In addition to the matrix, looking at everything within the EDC, when I first came in, I looked at flows, processes, procedures, and it was easier for me to come in and just develop something new. I don't mean that in a negative way, but just come in and develop a model that I'm used to working with, and then start grabbing from that to enhance what we're going to have. To answer that question, I'm going to be working on a new matrix, specifically on the reporting side.
Okay.
Let me ask you, many, many years ago, my oldest daughter went to Schreiner and got an LVN degree.
Mhm.
And I don't know if they do RN program or not now.
Yes.
I think so.
Yes,
Yeah.
they do.
So first of all, can the EIC, I think the EIC can spend money for job training and things like that?
Correct.
Now, this may be way out, just craziness, but I was just wondering if maybe the city, EIC and Schreiner coordinating with, say, the Fredericksburg Hospital and our hospital, if they, if we someday may want to expand their RN program, which would be, I think, good for Kerrville. And is that something that might even, just an idea that could be thrown out somewhere down the line?
That's one thing that we are most definitely looking at right now, because on the hospitals between the three, that is an economic driver, not only for Kerrville, not only for the county, but for the region. And you look at perhaps what Fredericksburg has as well, then that driver becomes even bigger, and its impact is pretty significant. So it's to our benefit to work with them. Hence, that's why when I was meeting with the Texas Workforce Commissioner. What can we do to further strengthen that pipeline of talent that we have and that we need specifically for the medical and the health sector? And it's a growing sector. I mean, it's going to continue to grow. And in meeting with them, then we get into the other part, which is a challenge. Okay, so now where are we going to get the people to fill some of these jobs if they're going to start growing? So the answer is yes. Can we support them financially? By state statute, we can develop programs to develop that particular sector.
It's my understanding that a lot of hospitals, particularly in Austin, they don't even hire LVNs too much anymore. You almost have to have an RN
Really?
in Brackenridge and Seton and places like that.
Those are great, very good paying jobs that a community of 100 to 150,000 wishes they would have that economic driver that we have here in Kerrville.
Are there any communication with KISD? Because I know some of the ideas have been tossed around to bring those opportunities to senior high school students or even younger to start promoting a pilot's license, a nurse's license. And maybe they won't leave Kerrville at all. They'll just stay here and go to our classes here and already be here.
Yeah.
It's just, I know we were talking with.
Yes, we've had some discussions with them, and as a result of that, that's why I ended up asking, okay, what can we do in these particular sectors? Also working with the Schreiner University, and then let's not forget that we have Alamo colleges, and that is a very important middle skill set that they provide for this area.
How many kids are in Alamo College now? Do you know what their enrollment is?
I'm not too sure, but I can find out for you.
It's okay.
Is it possible to get a copy electronically maybe of your report?
Yes.
I wrote a lot of notes, but I missed a lot too, so
Yes, most definitely.
thank you. That'd be great.
All right, any other questions? Thank you, Gil.
All right, thank you.
Sounds exciting. I feel like this microphone is very,
It's
echoing.
you
Is
got
it?
you got
Yeah, I'll
back
get
you got
back a
feedback
little
on it.
you don't need too much of me, trust me.
All right, item number 4 is the appointment of an EIC secretary. And our current secretary, Cheryl Brown, has been, I guess her job duties have changed just a little bit. And so as you've noticed, Santa Waller's been here, how many meetings now, Santa? 3, 4?
3 or 4.
And before that, she was here with Cheryl, so we do need to replace and appoint the position that Cheryl is vacating. And I believe the city is wanting us to make it official that Santa is our new Secretary of EIC. So I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Has anybody asked Santa if she'd like to do it?
I have a huge assumption.
We're worried what you'll say.
Oh, no, I know, okay.
So don't ask her.
We won't ask then.
Oh, good. So we
I'll
do
make a
have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor of Santa Waller being appointed as our EIC secretary, raise your right hand. And that motion carries unanimously. Welcome aboard, officially.
Thank you, I think.
All right, on to item number 5, which is an information and discussion item and a presentation from the city on their multi-year community improvement plan as we had discussed. I think originally we had talked about maybe having a separate meeting for this, but our agenda was not too overwhelming this month, so we decided to go ahead and do it now. So, EA?
Yes, sir. Yeah, we'll just go through brief prop here. So we want to take the opportunity, really to go through a couple important documents that our staff created through the city budget process, which, as you know, occurs all year long, but is very intense over the summer time frame. And then going into the late fall, typically adopted. And so we included within your packet these two 11 by 17 sheets that are the capital project list for two larger capital project funding sources: the general fund and then the water capital project fund. And so I just want to walk through this a little bit. This is these are 10-year outlooks, and this just helps us do long-range planning, particularly with our multitude of master planning processes As you know, we've got a streets master plan, we've got master plans related to water and sewer, we've got master plans that we're launching off on now for drainage, we've got parks and recreation master plans, we've got river trail master plans. We do a lot of planning efforts, and so again, we talked about a little bit earlier, the rubber meets the road on the budget, and the budget for capital projects, certainly we've got to feather these things in and figure out multiple funding sources and grant funding sources, and kind of figure out how it all comes together. So this is an attempt to put all that information onto one 11 by 17 summary chart and just get a little bit better picture. So our intent today was to be able to bring this to you, as well as have some discussion about some other community projects that we know that some are on the private side are percolating out there, and just better make sure that these projects are on your radar. So you all can have that in the back of your minds as you're having dialogue about funding requests and funding applications that are out there. So just kind of going fundamentally through the sheet, as you can see at the top of the sheets, both of them are project funding summary, and you can see again multiple funding sources, whether that's certificates of obligation, general obligation bonds, pay-as-you-go from several sources, and then grants, donation, and outside funding. You can see the total of those across really what amounts to 13 different fiscal years. The two blue columns are several of the actuals, both from previous years and fiscal year 17. Now recall that right now we are in fiscal year 19. We have a different fiscal year than most private entities, and even some other state and nonprofit and government entities. The end of our fiscal year is the end of September, and then we start a new budget year October 1. So recognize that as we are walking through this, but the current fiscal year is actually that first orange column. The last fiscal year is indicated in that green column. So those are, as we update for this next budget cycle, those will kind of roll, last year's fiscal year will roll into the actuals, and we'll keep shifting forward. So across, you can see the total funding sources as you pull all these back, roughly $56 million in overall funding necessary for the 33 projects that have been identified in this sheet, which carry over both, again, those previous years as well as the go-forward years, being this year and then 9 years forward. Want to highlight a couple projects here, and I'll start on the General Capital Projects Fund.
Can I ask one quick question?
Yes, sir.
On the line 4, general obligation bonds, you're saying that's all been issued in the past, or is that future?
No, sir. No, sir. And as you can see, it really pertains, those really pertain to elements that are in out fiscal years.
Yeah, I see.
So you can see the totals from what looks like fiscal year 2020,
Okay.
fiscal year 2021, fiscal year 2023.
All right, so that'll require a vote of the public?
Yes, sir.
Thank
That's
you.
correct. So I just want to kind of go through here and highlight a few elements. Item number 5 within project expenditures, tennis center renovation. As you can see, that's the 1.5. This group is very intimately familiar with that piece. Item 6, river trail, amounts to 6.5. And you can see a lot of expenditures in those previous years and last fiscal years, certainly culminating in the current element of the extension that was just completed to the Diedrich Center. A couple other ones I want to highlight. Number 12, the Aquatic Center. That only has the existing feasibility amount that's in there right now, but you'll see the to be determined element in 2021. The range right now, we had a little bit of discussion earlier in the project update discussion, but we're looking, based off of the community feedback, a range of projects really in that 8 to possibly up to 23 for the fully master planned element that has been discussed with the community. So again, that next step is really to bring in several possibilities there and hone in on that number. But we are beginning to figure out what that TBD could be, and then certainly looking at possible funding sources.
You haven't figured a range yet, though, have you?
Again, that's for right now. What the community's indicated, it's kind of that 8 to 23 element.
8 what?
8 million to 23 million.
For the swimming pool?
Yes, sir.
Well,
Other than a swimming.
Yeah.
The swimming pool?
It's a full aquatic
It's more
center.
than a swimming pool, but-
Yeah.
That's kind of what our reaction was.
Swimming pool?
Yes, sir.
It's a center, it's an aquatic center.
Excuse
We're gonna hold the Olympics here?
You're gonna see something quite different when it comes to you.
That's right.
The $1 million on the, line 7 on the Schreiner Mansion, that's already been, has that been approved by council to spend that money?
No, and that element actually ties up to, if you look at number 11 on the
Okay.
project funding to grants, donations, and outside funding. So those two pieces are correlated.
Okay.
But no, there has not been at this time anything approved for that. But if you've got a check for us,
Yeah.
we could
Well, I've got a
accelerate.
check, but I hope you can catch it on the second balance.
I gotcha. One I want to highlight as well, just because of the size of the number, number 16. We haven't talked about it extensively with this group, but the city has moved forward with a feasibility analysis regarding the public safety complex. Right now, that element is allocated in here at 10 million. So certainly a very big slug of funding is going to be necessary from general fund sources to be able to accomplish that for the community in the future. Number 25, downtown and garage streetscape improvements. As you can see, we've had a few modest elements over the years, and certainly this group has been putting some money towards that based off of feedback you've given us within your budgeting process. And so we look forward to coming forward to you here in the near future and having some dialogue about if that's a project you want to continue to look to fund, and what our latest thoughts are on estimates and where we go with
Did
that.
we have anything from Peter Lewis before? I thought we had some preliminary drawings.
We do. There are some preliminary concepts, and
So we have something to look at.
yes, ma'am. And what we've asked, we just recently met with Mr. Lewis, and he is dusting everything off and re-preparing everything and making sure that estimates are polished up. And we anticipate having that dialogue with this group and the city council here over the next couple months.
Great.
Good.
Last on this sheet, number 29, park improvements, again, related to, some of those bond funding elements, but I just wanted to highlight the $5 million overall in what we would theorize as two tranches, potentially in 2021 and 2023. So just looking at, right now, not identified towards any specific projects, but, certainly some enhancements within our Parks and Recreation system.
So I might comment also that you'll also note that on 26, you got streets and drainage,
Yes.
7 million. So what we're contemplating here, we have a work session with the council in March to look at the possibility of a bond election in November of this year. And the way we've laid this out is the year that we can afford to do it. So the idea is that we'd go to the voters all at one time, with separate propositions, but we wouldn't sell all the bonds at one time, right? We'd sell them over a period of time, with the idea that we would not increase the tax rate as a result of the approval of the bonds. So we're basically layering in new debt as the old debt's paid off, so that we don't have an impact on the tax rate. So that's our approach now, and has been for the last year and a half, and that's the way this is laid out.
Put Lois Street on the top of the list.
Looking at the next sheet in front of you, the Water Capital Projects Fund, and I'll go a little bit quicker through these. Number 2, Legion Lift Station, again, we talked about that one pretty extensively before. Number 13 and 14 related to NAP Lift Station, NAP Wet Well, and Force Mains. Really see that as potentially one of the next more higher prioritized projects, and so we're currently evaluating if that one needs to potentially be accelerated from where it was allocated within this. And so that is an ongoing effort right now. Really, number 22 also related to that. Starting to see more activity really along that kind of far western, northwestern boundary, and really seeing a potential roadblock there as far as wastewater service in the future. So one of the elements that we are evaluating. So be happy to answer any questions you all may have regarding those big sheets. And again, this isn't meant to kind of debate these projects necessarily, but really just to kind of have these items on the radar, so we can kind of have them in the back of your minds as we move forward with various funding.
Is there any
programs.
conversation with Ingram about wastewater and all that stuff now? Is that part of the SNAP thing? Or is that kind of not really out there?
Certainly, as they continue to grow, their growth is very similar to Kerrville's, if not even a little bit slower. And so we're ongoing dialogue certainly about wastewater service, but we've got an existing contractual relationship right now. Without major elements of annexation in that community or some major element that's growing, we've got existing capacity right now. It's not reserved for them per se, but right now there is capacity within that line.
Okay.
Line 20 on the water treatment, is that a good number, or is that kind of a low number on the water project expenditures? 5 million back out into fiscal year 28? I thought it was going to be a lot more than that.
Really depends on how that project is sized, but under current estimates, and again, all these are in today's dollars, so you got to kind of extrapolate back for real time value of money. But yes, sir, under what it's currently been very, very loosely conceptualized, that's a feasible number. Now, will it be in 10, 15, 20 years potentially when this community might think about it? I don't know if that number will still be accurate. Probably not.
So how do you, with the water capital project, how do you determine when those types of projects come here for funding, along with on the other list, those other projects that are there? That's part of the reason we wanted to kind of know where you were, was what's coming down the line. How do you determine where those projects pertain to us?
I think when we identify elements that are an impediment to development and can really be tied off to business development, that but for those improvements occurring, economic development would not be possible in those areas. That certainly is a big trigger for us or housing or any other number of elements within the purview of EIC. That's really what triggers us coming forward to this group and saying, okay, maybe we need to think about this because because otherwise the economic development's occurring one way or another, right? And so it's just a philosophical conversation: is the ratepayer paying for it, or is the EIC potentially assisting with that through the mechanisms that you all have? But one way or another, infrastructure is economic development, right? We've had that conversation.
Right. So expansion basically of infrastructure would be economic development. But
Yes, sir.
A replacement of something that's failed
Right.
may or may not be. I mean, it depends on the project, but in general, the water fund would pay its own way for those things, right?
Yes.
Right,
Ron?
so with Legion, for example, if we had just gone back and replaced it with the existing size, that's really just replacing existing infrastructure, but it's actually gonna be double the size. Okay.
That makes sense.
So it encourages development. It encourages it. It facilitates it.
And we have specific projects that we can point to that, like Schreiner University, that are depending upon it for their growth. And we kind of said, this is our plans, and they're kind of betting on that.
So for fiscal year 2019, my assumption is most of this stuff's been vetted, and your funding source. So 20 on, would that be the year that we're probably contemplating those types of funding sources?
Yes, sir.
In both of these project lists?
Yes, sir.
So what do you anticipate, or what does the city anticipate, and I put that personally, it wasn't a personal question, what does the city anticipate in these projects needing funding from EIC?
I'm glad you asked that. Let me segue on to other community projects. So these are several pieces that we know are percolating out in the community. One is the potential Olympic Drive extension with the school bond here recently passing and having that middle school site being moved on here in the very near future regarding construction. We know that there's going to be some roadway construction that's going to be necessary along that. However, it's really only the pro rata share of that piece because they only have a certain portion of the frontage of that. Again, part of that is owned, the other vacant properties, part of it is city-owned, part of it is owned by Schreiner University, which is actively looking to market that for economic development. But we recognize that both the high school and the middle school serve as a catalytic effect within that area. But one of the impediments certainly is going to be the extension of infrastructure along Olympic Drive. That is a piece that we want to, sooner than later, I think, have some conversation with you all about that can assist us both in potentially workforce housing goals, which we've looked at on the city-owned roughly 32 acres near that middle school site, as well as encouraging development of that other remainder tract of land that would then be surrounding the middle school. So that's one piece. Workforce housing, again, in the very area that we talked about, as well as some other inquiries that we've had in other parts of the community, Meadowview, Spur 100. We hear bits and pieces from the development community in a number of areas, and so workforce housing is certainly one that we want to keep on y'all's radar as we're hearing about elements that are out there. Additional river trail extensions. Again, we just talked or just completed the agreement in regards to Schreiner University, but certainly we talked about the master planning effort that has ensued here over the last 12 months or so and been approved by both Parks Board and the City Council. And so there are certainly future extensions that are contemplated. Not necessarily this year per se, but we want to keep those on y'all's radar and also gauge what priority y'all may have in looking to fund some of those. Hotel Conference Center, we did get resolutions passed by both the City Council as well as the Kerr County this week and last week. Moving forward with the ability to go to the state legislature and potentially get some refunding of the state's portion of the existing hotel motel occupancy tax that is out there. So that Hotel Conference Center piece, as contemplated through one of our recent economic development studies, has a gap. And that's one funding piece that helps fill that gap. But certainly we recognize there could be an EIC component to that as well. Arcadia Theater, we haven't talked about with this group here in probably over a year now, but we know that there's been some recent transfers of ownership for that facility, and certainly suspect that there could be an application, coming in the near term for that one as well. So this is just a highlight of a few that are out there that we know of. As far as the public projects, I think, aquatics is one that we're going to be talking to you as that feasibility element is wrapping up. Downtown Garage and Streetscape is one that we're going to be talking to you guys as that's wrapping up. And then, if there are additional river trail extensions, I could see that, here in the next, I'll say near term of 12 to 24 months, hopefully as we're wrapping up the Schreiner extension.
EA, do you have any concept of next steps on Hotel Conference Center funding and when that, what a time frame might be for moving forward on that?
So there really isn't a time frame. We don't have a developer selected. We don't have a site selected. A large reason why the city's not been able to do this before, and there's been a lot of attempts, is because they've never been able to make the money work. Maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago, the EIC was asked to fund a large chunk of that, but it still wasn't enough. So the stack would be the state's 6% over a 10-year period. It's capped at 10 years from the date the CO is issued. It would be possibly the city's portion of 7%. That's what Fredericksburg's doing, both of those. And they got to go get the state funding just like we do. Their project is not funded. It would possibly property tax and then maybe some EIC funding. It just depends on, what the total scope of the project is and the cost of the project.
Right.
And we're just not there yet. But there's no really any point in looking at that until we have the state's funding, because that's going to put us over the top to be able to make it possible.
Okay.
That's also a 10-year window, right?
What's the state's number, the percent?
The estimate's 4.4.
Mark, have you ever, are you familiar with the conference center in San Marcos?
Yes,
And I'm just curious, that's an embassy, was it an Embassy Suites?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any, I mean, do they have any numbers that, you know, return on their investment? I mean, have you seen anything? I guess my concern's always been about hotel conference center, is kind of the law of diminishing return. Everybody puts one up, and is there enough business to go around?
Right. So the 2018 study that we did demonstrated that this market could support a certain size hotel in terms of the number of rooms or keys, as they call them, and meeting space. And they looked at the region, they looked at the prospect of the hotel coming in down on Water Street as part of that. They looked at what we're not getting based upon all their research. And so the firm that we hired, they specialize in this. They used to be PKF, and then they became CBRE, and now they're a spinoff. But they do this for both private sector and public sector. And they identified what the gap would be in terms of making the conference center funding work, because the idea is that the city would own the conference center and the private sector would own the hotel, the city would own the land. That's the way the state funding mechanism works. So, but they also performed a pro forma on the facility on how it might perform over a certain number of years, and how it would ramp up to certain occupancy, certain average daily room rate, and funding sources from all sources. They also looked at the impact to the local economy, and then the impact to the government entities as well. So all that is part of the study, and if we ever get into a position where we're going to be asking you all for EIC funding, then you'll be able to see all of that. But right now, it's just not being shared because we don't know who our partner is, and we don't want to tip our hand in terms of what they might be eligible for. It's all going to be a negotiation.
All right. Any further questions? This was information I think that we asked for, and very good information indeed.
Yeah.
So
Overwhelming.
I guess these are gonna happen as they happen, right? Just whatever's first, whoever gets to the starting line first, supposedly, will be the order they'll
What I
come.
talk about first is the first one there, Olympic Drive. We have a meeting with the school district today. And, you know, this is really about our property and marking our properties. They're gonna go ahead and put half the road in because they have to as part of their project. It makes sense for us to do our half now. So we don't know that yet. We need to look at the information and then bring that to you all for your consideration.
All right,
Okay, very good.
Good information.
very good information. Thank you,
Sure
EA.
is.
Thank you, Mark. All right. Is there any need for us to consider executive session?
I requested an executive session.
Okay.
Under sections 551.071, 551.087, for some information regarding economic development negotiations.
Is that a motion?
It is a motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor of moving to executive session, raise your right hand. We will adjourn to executive session. It's 4:58. Okay, it's 5:10 and we're back in regular session. Nothing was deliberated in executive session, so there's nothing here for us to discuss any further with regard to the conversation there. Any items for future agendas? All right, any announcements? All right, I was told we don't have to vote on an adjournment. Is that correct, Mike? So I've been doing this, not from this chair, but in here, we voted every time since I've been here, and Mike's now telling me we don't, so.
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
Don't we have a Monday holiday issue next month too, or am I imagining it?
Oh.
The EIC meeting in February would fall, I believe, on the 21st, which is
Right.
President's Day.
Right.
The City Hall will be open, so we don't have an issue if you all don't have an issue, but that's certainly y'all's purview.
We can't,
Oh,
we
we can
can't
do
take
it.
any action in here because
right.
it's not on the agenda.
That's
Okay.
right.
But we can certainly,
Let me know if there's any conflicts,
Yeah,
if
if
I,
there's
if I
any
need to
conflicts
raise
with
the
that.
issue with you
Yeah.
all.
Don't,
I don't. I'd rather keep it because we
Yeah.
keep moving it and then I get messed up.
right.
Could I ask one more thing relative to that? Because we meet on Mondays, this is a recurring problem and we'll be, annually. We got 2 more coming up, 2 or 3 more coming up before the end of the year. Maybe we ought to try and see if we can decide on, do we move forward, do we move back a week or something?
Always
The
on
only
those.
reason I'm saying that is because we travel a lot. I don't want to miss if I can avoid.
Sure.
But sometimes we plan pretty far out. So
Sure.
if we could come up with a policy that if there is a Monday holiday, we move one way or the other, I think it might help.
What we can do, probably in the June timeframe when we have appointments and reappointments that occur, we can, as we're working through y'all's budget process, we can go ahead and set or try to set
That'd be
a
great.
12-month calendar and kind of think ahead a little bit on some of those items.
That'd be great.
Yeah, we appreciate those
Yeah.
comments.
so do the bylaws not supersede us making that?
We'll double check the bylaws.
Because I've read them a few times and I think it prescribes is the third Monday of the month.
Mm.
I think they do, and also talks about an annual meeting in June. We'll look through that and make sure y'all are legal and. above
It'll
board.
help
Thank
attendance,
you.
maybe.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
All right, let's adjourn then.
All righty.
All
All
in
righty.
favor, no.
5:12.
Out into the frozen